All right, this time last week we gave you our top 12 running back rankings.
That's right.
Today we are giving you our top 12 wide receivers, diving deep into the nitty gritty of the top 12. Do us a favor, go ahead and drop a like to show some love. Subscribe if you like fantasy football. I want you to comment down below who's the player that is not currently in top 12 ADP that you think should be ranked top 12 as a wide receiver.
Love that.
And hey, if you want an advantage on your fantasy leagues, then go ahead and sign up to flockfantasy.com with our code LAND. That will give you 30% off your membership. You're going to get access to a bunch of articles, rankings for best ball, superflex, dynasty, even if you're in a dynasty league, and a bunch more. Go ahead and check it out with the comment that is pinned. 30% off with our code. Okay, so here's the way we're breaking this down with the top 12. We're getting even deeper into these tiers.
Yeah.
So we're gonna the way I thought about it, Badake, which let me know if you agree, is let's talk about who's worthy of the 101. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Who's worthy of being top 6?
Mm-hmm.
Who are you gonna draft top 10, top 12, and then who is worthy of being in round 2? And the reason that we're going so high here is because wide receivers are gonna go off the board really early this year. That's why you're gonna see a lot of wide receivers who are being ranked as first round picks. So what we did last time was I showed my rankings and then we showed yours and we saw how they differed. I think that was a good format. Are you happy to do that again?
Let's do that, and then we can have a generalized conversation about everyone.
Okay, so here in round 2, I am comfortably taking Chris Olave. I've talked about him as a breakout candidate this year. When you look at Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson's rookie seasons, they were very, very similar. And there's a lot of hype out there for Garrett Wilson. He got a quarterback upgrade, but so did, as much as a lot of people hate Derek Carr, so did Chris Olave. And they both had very good years despite very poor quarterback play. So he is well worthy of a second round pick in my eyes. So is Jalen Waddle, who is coming off another top 10 finish despite Tua missing some time last year. But he was fantastic. With Tua on the field, Jalen Waddle was an absolute stud. You wanted him in your lineup. Had every chance every time he stepped on the field to put up 30 points. I mean, that's the type of receiver we're dealing with here. He and Tyreek just complement each other perfectly. I think they're both great picks in the second round. Now, this is where I think it gets really difficult because these guys who are in my top 12, I'm fully aware that not all of these wide receivers will be drafted in the top 12. Some of these guys will be second round picks, but the way I looked at it is I grouped these guys together of, hey, I might not be taking them top 10 or top 6, but they are worthy of being a first round pick in fantasy drafts this year, PPR leagues. And it just depends, I guess, on your preference or the narrative you want to spin. But Davante Adams, to me, is on the edge. I know this might be a player that you and I disagree on, so we'll find out here in a second. But to me, he's on the edge. I think he's still well worthy of a first-round pick. You talked about it in a recent video. Since 2017, he's been a top 3 wide receiver every single year.
Yeah.
And I understand that we now have Jimmy G instead of Derek Carr. So in fantasy, there might be a little bit of a downgrade. But we're still talking about a wide receiver who had 180 targets last year, who just joined the Raiders. So I think while the upside might be limited with Jimmy G, he might not get as many deep balls. I think he's going to be a very safe pick because of the amount of targets he will have. After all, this team isn't rebuilding. They just brought in Jimmy G. The coach wants to win. They have Josh Jacobs. They have Davante Adams all in their primes. I think that Davante Adams is a lock for 160, 165 targets this year. So I think the upside is limited, but I think he's still going to be a monster in PPR leagues.
Right.
And then I don't really know at the moment who I prefer between him and Garrett Wilson. It's very, very close. Both, I think you can make a case for being top 12. You can make a case for both of these guys being early second rounders, but I think they're worthy of being drafted in the top 12. Garrett Wilson, obviously, great rookie year, offensive rookie of the year. You add Aaron Rodgers. All signs point towards him being a great pick. I mean, I think you can make the case, though, that there might be more upside with Wilson than Adams, but I would say there's far more risk. Like the floor, I think, is much lower than what Adams' floor presents. So I guess it depends on how you want to, again, spin your perspective. I would say Amon-Ra St. Brown is also well worthy of being a first round pick.
Mm-hmm.
Last year, he was a wide receiver 7, scoring almost 17 points per game. He was better than Jalen Waddle. He was better than Devonta Smith. He was better than Amari Cooper on a per game basis. So I think he's well worthy of being a first round pick. And look, if Jameson Williams was lining up day 1 as a complimentary wide receiver, maybe I would pop him in that round 2. But like from day 1, he's going to be the guy again, getting a ton of opportunities. And this is where some people might disagree with me, but this is where I would put AJ Brown as well in the top 12. I wouldn't put him top 10. I understand last year he had a very good year. AJ Brown was a wide receiver 6, had 145 targets, 88 receptions, 17.6 points per game. And maybe it's unfair for me to do this. I just think that Devontae Adams and AJ Brown and Devontae Smith are very similar in value. I think you're getting a very similar outcome with those two options. So I don't think AJ Brown should be drafted in the top 10. And we did a video on this, but AJ Brown and Devonta Smith, after week 1, from week 2 onwards for the entire year, one was a wide receiver 6, the other was a wide receiver 7. So I don't think there's as much of a difference between those two wide receivers. And I think there should be some sort of regression potentially this year, as they have a much more difficult schedule. Last year, they had the easiest schedule of any team in the NFL. And then in my top 10, there's 2 wide receivers that I would put in that category. One would be CeeDee Lamb, and the other would be Stephon Diggs. Now, I have a question. Maybe you can address it in your rankings and let me know if I'm crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But ADP currently has AJ Brown ahead of CeeDee Lamb. And I'm not sure why. Because even last year, CeeDee Lamb had more receptions. He had 11 more targets on the year. On a per game basis, he was better. I'm confused as to why CeeDee Lamb in almost everyone's rankings in ADP is below AJ Brown. I don't understand it. I think he's going to step into another dominant year. Brandon Cooks, to me, only offers a complementary piece, which helps him as well, not be so focused on by the defense. So I don't know. Maybe you can talk on that one later. I think he's well deserving of the top 10 pick. And then Stephon Diggs, don't buy into this whole narrative that him and Josh Allen are like, come on, like Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs will be best friends again this year. They'll figure it out. Then in my top 6, there are 3 wide receivers, being Jamar Chase, Tyreek Hill, who I would say myself is being a little bit disrespected this offseason, as well as Cooper Kupp, who is being disrespected. Kupp is my wide receiver 2 on a per game basis. Through 9 games, no one scored more points than Cooper Kupp at the wide receiver position, not even Justin Jefferson. You bring back Matt Stafford. Matt Stafford is healthy. And guess who the wide receiver 2 is there? Van Jefferson? Puka Nacua. I mean, Cooper Kupp is going to dominate targets again, unquestionably, on the Rams. And then at my 101 is where I would have Justin Jefferson. To me, if you're going to take a wide receiver 101, if it's not going to be CMC, which in a PPR league, I would probably take Jefferson 1 overall. Then it would be Justin Jefferson. Led the league in receptions, led the league in targets, led the league in receiving yards, and he has just gotten better and better every year after setting records as a rookie. So he's on a historic pace. He's on the pace to be the best wide receiver ever. I know that sounds dramatic, but that's the pace he's on. I'm not saying it will happen, but my God, he's had one hell of a start to his career. So I wouldn't overthink it here. He feels like the safest upside pick at the 101. So that's the way my top 12 looks, and I guess the rationale and the reasoning for it. Let's now reset for you. Where are you differing here with this list, and just comment on some of the things that we talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing I want to address is the question that you asked: why do they have AJ Brown over CeeDee Lamb? No idea, because I'm kind of with you there on the community right now as I'm looking at it. As we're recording, AJ Brown wide receiver 6, CeeDee Lamb wide receiver 7. They're essentially back to back in the rankings. Not necessarily sure why, but I completely agree. CeeDee Lamb, more targets, more opportunities should be coming his way. With AJ Brown has more competition on his team, especially with Dallas Goedert, right? DeAndre Swift as well. Like, so many opportunities for other people to eat over there.
I'm almost trying to figure out if I want AJ Brown or Devontae Adams, AJ Brown or Amon-Ra. So
okay,
that's where I am.
Look, they're all very similar. But let's start from the bottom here. Round round two for me. So this is all of Zach's rankings. So remember that. If not, you can kind of click back into the video. But for me, the only person in my tier 5 is in round two, excuse me, is Chris Olave.
That's it.
That is all that's there is Chris Olave. I expect, the second year come up, the second year breakout here with Derek Carr, a significantly better quarterback, more consistency. We saw what he did there with Devontae Adams, and I think that could potentially continue with Chris Olave. Now going into my top 12, I have Devonta Smith and Jalen Waddle only.
Okay.
So we can kind of talk about Devontae Adams.
Do you not have Devontae Adams in the second round then?
I don't have Devontae Adams in my top 12.
You think he's worthy of a second round pick?
He is worthy of a second round pick.
12.
Completely agree.
Okay.
Completely agree. He is worthy of a second round pick.
I just want to make sure we're on the same page there.
Yeah. Devontae Adams is my wide receiver 13. I brought out multiple videos, so definitely go check that out. Play you must avoid, and must avoid players in each round. That video should be coming out or already already.
Devonta Smith and Jalen Waddle in your top 12?
In my top 12, exactly.
Okay, sorry, continue.
Yeah, so in my top 10 now, I have A.J. Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Garrett Wilson.
Okay.
All these guys, I really believe, kind of like what Zach was alluding to, you kind of think about these guys, you think of these opportunities. I love Amon-Ra. I love there's really there is competition in all these teams, right? I think Garrett Wilson, we are projecting to be at the highest point of his career now with Aaron Rodgers, and I think that could and will happen this year. We are projecting, but I think this is probably, it sounds wild to say, but it feels like the safest projection that you can really bet on, really, when you think of Garrett Wilson and Aaron Rodgers and how great Aaron Rodgers has been and how good and how great Garrett Wilson has had as a rookie season. Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's going to continue to eat, kind of like what you were saying. We finished wide receiver 7 this past year, and that was him missing, I think it was like 2 to 4 games, if I'm not mistaken, this past year. 16.7 fantasy points per game. That's going to continue. A.J. Brown, only wide receiver 6, very similar to Amon-Ra with 17.6. Another guy. I actually really wanted to bring Devonta Smith up to top 10 because I think that's how close, once again, kind of how what you're alluding to, these players are so close to each other. They finished essentially really back to back, right? A.J. Brown, wide receiver 6, Devonta Smith, wide receiver 9. And once again, you take away that one game, they're back to back there. So that kind of makes sense. My top 6, this is where I think every single one of these guys could be drafted in your top 6. And I think this is how I had them in my order. So I have Cooper Kupp, Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase, Stephon Diggs, and CeeDee Lamb. All these guys, in my opinion.
Is that in what order?
Cooper Kupp is first. Excuse me. Yeah, so Cooper Kupp, Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase, Stephon Diggs, and CeeDee Lamb. All these guys, in my opinion, are worthy of being a top 6 picks. And if you really break down the points per fantasy points per game, Jamar Chase 18.6, CeeDee Lamb 17.7, Stephon Diggs 18.9. Yes, it gets a little bit higher with Tyreek Hill and Cooper Kupp, and if we really want to talk about it, we can have an argument of them, Cooper Kupp and Tyreek Hill being wide receiver 1. But to really break it down, like if we want another tier, right? So you put Justin Jefferson at the 101. Right? Okay. So if you really want to break it down, you can have Justin Jefferson and then another tier in between of like the 101, 102, 103 with it could be Cooper Kupp, Tyreek Hill. And then your top 6 of Jamar Chase, Stephon Diggs, and CeeDee Lamb. But once again, all these wide receivers in my top 6 are worthy, in my opinion, of being a top 6 pick. Once again, all these guys really back to back in points per game. So I kind of want to say that again. Stephon Diggs, 18.9. Jamar Chase, 18.6. CeeDee Lamb, 17.7. Right? I mean, Tyreek Hill, obviously, once again, you go up higher, 20.1. Cooper Kupp, 22.4. He missed the second half of the season. We all know he probably would have finished wide receiver 1. So I think for me, this is how it lines up for me. I think all these guys are, once again, worthy of a top 6 pick. I think my top 10 are guys that easily can squeeze into the top 6 and finish as a top 6 guy. I think just to really, for this video's sake, you really have to break it down per section here. But yeah, I would also say honorable mention right outside my top. I think it was also deserving to be in the second round is T. Higgins. I know we didn't talk about him, but Devontae Adams and T.
Okay.
Higgins both are,
Right.
I would say, in my rankings, honorable mentions to be going into the second round right after Chris Olave.
Okay, so I think the biggest point of disagreement we would have then is Devontae Adams.
Yeah. Which we've kind of spoken about once again in multiple videos.
Where is he ranked for you?
13, wide receiver 13.
Man, I'll be honest, I don't see a scenario in which Adams is not a top 12 wide receiver.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure the video's already out. We're kind of alluding to what I talked about with Devontae Adams. Jimmy G's coming in, and yeah, maybe this is narrative I'm spinning, kind of what Zach is alluding to. There's going to be targets for Devontae Adams, but I think there's going to be a lot more inconsistency than consistency than what we saw with him. We saw with Derek Carr in the past. You know, one thing I took for granted was that Derek Carr and Devontae Adams had chemistry already, but they didn't have the chemistry that we saw. I guess we were so used to with Aaron Rodgers, and I think for him to grow a brand new chemistry with a quarterback and still getting those targets, I think there's going to be a lot of miscommunication. I think there's going to be a lot of, once again, inconsistencies. He can get 140 targets, but he can probably catch 90 of those 140 targets, right? I mean, he caught 100 of the 80 targets this past year, and he's finished as wide receiver.
Finished top 3.
Yeah, he finished top 3.
I don't get it,
I think that number is going to go lower. I think the
so
targets,
how much lower? So he got 180 targets last year. To me,
140
Devonta Smith is well worthy of being top 12. So he got 180 targets last year.
Mm-hmm.
How many is he getting this year?
I would say minimum 140. So let's just say he gets 140 targets and he catches, in this scenario, 80 targets less. So that's 100. That's 100, and that's
wait, what? Sorry.
So he caught 100 receptions out of 180 targets. So you take away
last
that
year. Okay.
last year. So you take 140 minus 80. Quick maths. Well, what's that in quick maths?
Sure, but I think what you're okay. So here's
what
I think
to.
is not lining up. Right, you're saying he's going to miss out on the deep ball from Derek Carr, but we're also not taking into account that he will be better over the middle of the field with Jimmy G. So therefore, his receptions versus targets could actually go up. He could have a higher catch percentage because Jimmy G is much better over the middle of the field than Derek Carr, whereas Derek Carr is much better down the field. So while he might miss out on some deep targets, yeah, I totally agree with you there. He will probably be much better, have a higher. It's not like I don't think the maths work out like that, honestly. So you think he gets 140 targets? First off, 40 less targets on a year. I don't know. I think he's a lock for 160, but that doesn't mean okay. You just take away 20 receptions. I don't know. I think that's flawed logic.
And when you look at, you're right. So when you look at the opportunities then, and you look at when he was getting the targets, I don't have the numbers, but he was first in touch. He had, sorry, not first. He 39% of his yards came from those deep passes. That is a huge percentage of that workload. And you're telling me that he's not going to get those yardage. He maybe get those PPR points. He may not get the touch. He had 38 targets with 20 plus yards or more. So let's just say that is less now. Let's say that is a 5-yard targets now. I can't do the math off the rip, but I think that is a significant difference when you think of the fantasy points that he could be receiving. He's no longer receiving with those deep passes.
So what I'm saying, which I don't think you're accounting for, is you're not taking into account how he scores fantasy points this year. You are only taking into account how he scored fantasy points last year.
Sure.
So how he scores points this year will be different because it's a different quarterback. Jimmy G does not operate the same way as Derek Carr, but that doesn't mean that he won't have a higher catch percentage or a similar amount of targets.
You're right.
He just might not have as many deep balls, or maybe he doesn't have, let's say, 14 touchdowns this year. Maybe it's only 9, but he has more receptions. I don't know. To me, I think you're discounting it way too much. I genuinely don't see a scenario in which Devontae Adams is not top 12. You said it yourself. Since 2017 in a different video, he's been the top 3 wide receiver. And if we're worried about chemistry, guess what? Last year, Jarrett Stidham started the last 2 games, and Devontae Adams averaged 23 plus points per game. I don't have no chemistry with that guy at all whatsoever. Different quarterback entirely. So to me, I don't know, dude. I understand the concern, but to have him outside the top 12, I cannot get behind
It
that.
may be bold, but I just feel more confident in the wide receivers that are currently going ahead of him. And you know, if you're telling me that I can get, yeah, Devontae Adams probably has a top 3 finish without a doubt, has top 3 upside. But if he's really going to drop out the way I'm predicting, then I'd rather go with the Devontae Adams, Jalen Waddle, the Garrett Wilsons, the Chris Olave that do have a good, solid top 12 finish upside, in my opinion. Maybe I would say you can have an argument with Chris Olave, but no doubt in my mind, I would say Jalen Waddle, Devonta Smith, and everyone else ahead of him that I have ahead of him,
Man, I don't know,
can easily finish. So look, it's just something that we would agree to disagree. But look, it's I wish I had the numbers in front of me with Jarrett Stidham, and see like what percent, like where those yardage came from. Because if those came from the deep ball passes, once again, that is a huge part of his game. But if that is wrong in those two games,
you're not taking into account how he'll score points this year. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
you're only taking into account how he did last year, which doesn't speak to what's represented this year, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think, but sure. I think it's that just plays a
It's
huge
like saying
part.
he only relies on deep ball points. But now he has a quarterback who doesn't throw the deep ball, so he's just not going to score points. I don't know. I think like it's going to be a different way of him scoring fantasy points. I mean, he has how many years now of being a top 3 guy? 6 years in a row. I don't know how he just falls out of the top 12 out of nowhere. He's still in his prime.
Yeah.
I don't know, man.
I think there's a couple different ways it can go. So let's see what happens. But that'll probably be the biggest one. Obviously, Devontae Adams outside the top 12. For me.
Okay, well, let's put a bet on it then. I'm going to say that Devontae Adams is a lock to finish in the top 12, and we have to figure out what the bet is. Let's say loser has to eat a spoonful of cinnamon on a stream.
Sure, let's do it. Okay,
Devontae Adams locked to be a top 12. If he's top 12, you're eating some cinnamon.
That's all right.
I'm curious what the people in the comments think. Let us know. I mean, outside of Devontae Adams, I mean, I don't have Devonta Smith ahead of Devontae Adams. That might be a point where we disagree. I love Chris Olave. He's in my round 2, so we agree there. But I wouldn't take Waddle in the first round, and I think you had him in the first round as well. But that just might be some points of disagreement there.
Yeah.
But that's it, guys. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Contribute to any sort of conversation that we've had, and we'll see you in the next video. Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, L-A-N-D, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.
It's so easy, even your grandma could scan that QR code right there.